down in 3, 2, 1. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second week of May. Since we don't know exactly when you're joining us, our schedule has gotten a little whacked out by first the NFL college draft and the Bears rookie minicamp. But this is our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. I am Hub Arkush, along with our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider beat reporter Sean Hammond and our Shaw Group Sports Editor for Shaw Media, Kyle Nabors. And guys, good to be back together today. We'll set everybody up on the front end. Again, if you are with us, then you can join these podcasts live as we record them. You can see us on video for whatever that's worth. But more importantly, you can submit your questions and your comments and participate in the conversation. Let us know what's on your mind. Give us our best chance to answer your questions or to opine on your thoughts and opinions. And normally we do it every Friday morning at 9:30. We're going to get back on schedule beginning next week. We're talking on Monday, May 9th. Beginning the week of May 16th is the beginning of Bears OTAs. Sean and I will be out with the team, watching them practice and work, getting to visit with Matt Eberflus and some of the players each Tuesday of the next 3 weeks. So beginning on a week from Friday, we will be back to our normal time. For those of you who want to join us, that's 9:30 Chicago time. And then we'll give you alerts as we go on. If you follow us on Twitter, again, it's at Kyle Nabors. It's at Sean_Hammond. I am at Hub_Arkush. And if all you want is the podcast, if you're not really concerned about joining us, then just go to the App Store on your phone or iTunes or ShawLocal.com, download a subscription to the podcast, and they'll be there automatically whenever you want to hear it. So, guys, good morning. Good to be back with you. Rookie minicamp in the books. It's like this team is just knocking down landmarks now. They hire a new GM and a coach. Then we get to see him at the combine. Then we get to see him again at the owners' meetings. Then we have a pre-draft visit, talk to him post-draft. Now rookie camp is out of the way. As I just reported, they'll now start OTAs next week, beginning on actually March 16th through the 18th. We'll be seeing them each Tuesday, so on the 17th, and then for 3 consecutive weeks before they get to the veteran minicamp. And, Sean, being out there this weekend, you get to see all the rookies. You get to meet them in person as opposed to on Zoom. But I think from a media and fan perspective, the best part is just, seeing them in person or on Zoom. And hearing them talk some more, getting to know them a little better as far as what kind of football players they are. They're up against each other. They still haven't seen the veterans. They don't really know the system. So it's going to be a little while before we really learn any more about any of these 11 young men that they drafted, another 16 undrafted rookie free agents.
Yeah, there's only so much to learn from rookie minicamp. We got out there the first day on Friday and it was a little sloppy, but that's to be expected. You're working with a bunch of new guys. You got quarterbacks who, hopefully won't see the field this fall because you got Justin Fields starting every game. And, particularly when you're looking at trying to determine if a guy like Velus Jones is going to be a good pick for the Bears, it's hard to tell at this point. You really got to get everybody in the building and have those veterans and see him working with Justin Fields before you can really get any sense of that. But, it's still, you can still learn some things just from seeing guys and getting to talk to them in person and watching how they go about practice and go about their day.
Kyle, it's interesting. We're coming off a 4-year run with the former Ryan and Matt, with Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy together. And if there was a theme or kind of a common refrain that we heard, they built their roster around no turds. They wanted all good guys in the locker room, high character guys who got along. I think every organization probably focuses on that. With this group, though, with the new Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus addition, as opposed to just as simple as no turds, what these guys want is team first. These guys, every kid you talk to is about winning is all that matters. They claim not to be interested in any individual accomplishments as long as they can come in and be part of a winning organization. Now, I think that's pretty common amongst players in the NFL, but when you hear it unanimously from every kid they drafted and all the UDRFAs, that's at the root of what Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus are teaching to the new kids, the new rookies that they're bringing in. And I'm sure they're looking for that in veterans as well.
Yeah, anytime you get a new regime, across the league, you're going to hear that a lot. it comes down to two things. One, of course, they believe it, or at least you hope they believe it. The other thing is you're trying to change a culture with the guys that are left over from that last regime, where they could have said all the nice things they could publicly, but you know how things are in an NFL locker room at the end of a regime. Things can get kind of dicey, kind of hairy. So you're trying to start off and build a new positive atmosphere, particularly at this time of year before the reality of an NFL season sets in. You got all the young kids in there. You want them to feel comfortable and start trying to build a bit of chemistry.
What I did feel was interesting and I was impressed by is the first three picks: Kyler Gordon, then Jaquan Brisker, and then Velus Jones. In each of our visits with them, they brought it up without being asked. It's not like you say, "Oh, of course, you're here to team first. What's your approach, whatever." But they each made various references to it as we were talking, and it clearly is kind of a way of life for them on the football field. And again, beyond that, Sean, we are talking about good young men. Just interesting to listen to them, to hear their stories, to see their focus. They're all obviously very bright. I loved the story. It was actually yesterday from Luke Getzey. It wasn't from Matt Eberflus, but he said when Velus Jones showed up on day one in a suit, everybody knew he was serious. So he apparently comes to work in a suit. This is, we talk about the 25-year-old rookie. This is a young man who is unusual. He's literally 3-4 years older, therefore more experienced. He's been in school for 6 years. And he already, Sean, it kind of has a little bit of an aura growing around him because of the unique skill set he brings, the comps in terms of play style. Nobody is saying that this kid is Deebo Samuel or A.J. Brown, but those are the comps as everybody's looking for one. That's why they took him higher than a lot of other teams had them on their boards. And now as we learn more about him, get to talk to him, see how bright, how serious, how focused he is. And mature, now, showing up in a suit may be a small thing. Well, it doesn't happen with rookies at NFL, off-season programs. And so it was kind of an interesting little sidelight with them.
Yeah, talk about a first impression. That's one way to impress your bosses and your teammates if you're coming in wearing a suit. And you're right, Hub. I mean, there's a lot of mature. Just getting to talk to these guys, they're really mature and well spoken, and several of them were team captains for their college teams, and you got to like that the Bears are prioritizing that. And sure, they didn't have their first round pick, but they're getting guys who are good people, or at least seem to be, and you would hope that can translate at least into, they certainly all seem like they're going to work hard and they're going to put their best foot forward, and hopefully that will we'll see them develop into really good football players over these next couple of years.
I do apologize to everybody. I just realized that when you're doing, broadcasts like this, you have these earbuds on, turning your head and clearing your throat with your hand over your mouth doesn't cover anything up. So I apologize for that. Excuse me. We'll try to find the mute button next time we have to do that. The one other thing, not the one other thing, but the other biggest takeaway I had, Kyle, and I say it kind of lighthearted because it doesn't really matter. But I did turn to Sean about 10, 15 minutes into that first practice and say, I've been doing this a long, long time, and I have never seen so many defensive backs on the field at one time in my life. When you look at this rookie camp, between the kids they drafted, obviously, you look at the undrafted rookie free agents, you look at the first-year players who were allowed to attend, and there were only 2 veteran tryouts, but one of them was a DB. I mean, it looked like of the 50-some guys, in attendance, at least 20 of them were DBs. And so, people were surprised when they took 2 in the second round. They shouldn't have been, because they didn't have a second starting corner or necessarily a third in the slot. They didn't have a second starting safety, and they got plug-and-play kids. But beyond that, as we learn more about Flus and his defense, we know it's the Tampa 2. We know the 3 technique and the will linebacker are incredibly important. But you also need DBs who can play both man and zone, and can play press and can play off. And they're looking for a lot of varied experience here. And they obviously are determined, other than around Jalen Johnson and Eddie Jackson and their key backup in DeAndre Houston Carson, they're going to rebuild this room if they have to. And I think the other thing we're seeing here, guys, is everybody would love to see Eddie Jackson return to that 2018 All-Pro form. But when you look at where that contract is and the way he's played with it the last year or two, if he doesn't return close to that form this year, I'm not sure he's part of the nucleus next year. So It looks like there is a focus first on defensive back as opposed to where everybody had hoped to see it on the offensive line or wide receiver.
You look at around the league right now, and for so long on the defense side of the ball, the emphasis was really whether you were in a 4-3 or 3-4 was your pass rushers, right? That's where the guys made their money. We saw it the way salaries were structured. You were looking for those premier pass rushers. And do you guys kind of get the sense? I guess, get the sense that you're starting to see a shift where, with the league becoming more of a pass-heavy league, team really focusing on those passing games. I think you're seeing teams are starting to respond on the defensive side of the ball, where they're putting a higher emphasis on that defensive backfield. I think that's why you're seeing Ryan Poles, when going into this rebuild, the board kind of fell that way. We've talked about when it came to the draft, but I also think he was more than comfortable to take those defensive backs and start building the defense from there, because that's the way you're going to see NFL teams start to approach it on the defensive side.
Well,
Yeah,
and you almost have to. I mean, you can't just get by with 4 good ones anymore, too. I mean, they talk about that nickel spot being essentially another starter, and you have to have at least 5 good ones, and guys are going to get hurt. So you need more of them, and you're right, Kyle. I mean, that's the way the league's going. That has to be a priority.
Guys, I just think everything in this game is so cyclical and always has been. And if you go back and look at the last 5 to 7, 8 years, and the way the wide receiver position took over first the draft and all the big athletic guys coming out, and then some of the divas, and now the speed demons. Everybody used to long for a number 1 receiver. Now everybody wants at least 3. Good teams have them, at least 2 or 3. And so while teams have always wanted that one lockdown cover corner, now you've seen the trend where teams are trying to find 2. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting this year was, safety may have been the second best position in the draft. It still looks to me like it probably was wide receiver, but I don't remember the last draft I saw with so many safeties with second and third round grades. So, when you combine that with the desire to have at least a pair of really solid cover corners, and now you want 2 interchangeable safeties. Yeah, the position and the fact that we've been talking the last few years about what a passing league it's become, and some of the video game offenses, the position that has to adjust and come around next is the secondary, and that does appear to be what's happening. And I guess maybe to kind of bring a different subject to see how they tie together, maybe that's one of the first intriguing things we should look at the new GM and Ryan Poles. You've got a younger guy who's grown up in the business and front offices through 11 years to be a 36-year-old GM and follows these trends. And what's been his experience as he has grown as a personnel evaluator and a personnel director and now a general manager? It's been watching this cycle of the game. And so, Kyle, I guess I'm not terribly – and then you got Flus in his defense. I'm not terribly surprised that that's where the Bears' focus seems to be right now.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if you're starting this rebuild. If you already feel like we're going to get into Justin Fields talk too, but you already potentially have your quarterback situation solved, so you didn't have to worry about that in the draft. So you say, okay, we're going to develop the quarterback, but we know we need to kind of revamp this defense. Let's start with the defensive backfield and work our way from there and see how this develops. I'm going to go ahead, Hub, and jump into some questions because they're kind of just tying into what we're talking about already. So I'm going to bring Rick in to start it off. And he just said, I understand the players are in shorts, but who this weekend caught your eye, and what position as a whole do you guys think the Bears are the strongest and the weakest? Hub?
Well, they're still weakest at wide receiver and on the offensive line. Nothing's changed there. You didn't really do anything to address wide receiver other than Velus Jones, who we're seeing more as an athlete than necessarily a pure wide receiver. In offensive line, you addressed it, but you addressed it in that third tier, that round 3 of the draft. So that's where they have to get better. As far as the guys who impressed me, I may have had a preconceived notion, Sean, because I really liked the 2 undrafted rookie linebackers, Jack Sanborn out of Wisconsin and C.J. Avery out of Louisville, and then Chase Allen, the tight end out of Iowa State. These are all kids that I had anywhere from 4th to 7th round grades on. Didn't think they'd be priority free agents, and the fact that the Bears snagged 3 of them. Well, watching them on Friday and Saturday, yesterday, Sunday was kind of a a glorified walkthrough. And yeah, not to mislead, actually Saturday I didn't make it to watch practice, but got all the follow up with all the interviews and all the Zooms and everything. Those three stood out. They look to be, whether it's just my imagination, or they're more serious, or they're closer to being NFL bodies or production wise. Those are three undrafted rookie free agents I would keep an eye on. One other kid, Kevin Shaw, is an undersized wide receiver out of Liberty. Played with Malik Willis there. He made one play on Friday, and I don't remember the formation or the play or whatever. All I know is he ended up deep down the field, bracketed in double coverage. Now Shaw is about 5'8" or 5'9". He had a couple 6'6" DBs on him, and he went up and took away a contested ball that I thought he had no chance on, when it got out there. And that really kind of raised the eyebrows. And so we'll be watching him a lot more as we get to OTAs and training camp. Now he's not an answer to your problem, because he's another undersized, bug you might put in the slot, so to speak. But those are four guys who did something that impressed me. And then, Rick and Sean, I'll kick it over to you. I was impressed by Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker before I saw him this weekend. Just, all the tape I watched, where I had them ranked, I think they were real value, for where the Bears took them. And then the rest, I want to be impressed by Zachary Thomas and hopefully Braxton Jones and Jatari Carter too. But that you can't see until they get in with the vets, and until they at least do a little bit of bumping. This was helmets only. And actually, C.J. Avery, the linebacker I love out of Louisville, he got in a little trouble. He didn't forget. He didn't, flatten anybody. But he was just running to the flat in 11 on 11. And he broke, and the running back broke at the same time. And it was actually Tristan Ebner, who we like a lot. And they cracked shoulders, and he not only knocked Ebner down, but he knocked the ball loose. So that was the one play that jumped out at me.
It's funny, anytime they're out there at this time of year, or anytime they're out there in shorts, I don't worry as much about the safety over the middle, getting a little too overhyped and popping a wide receiver. But the guys in the flats, those linebackers that just have it's the shorter thing, quick. I always worry that the instincts are going to take over and someone's not going to pull up in time.
Well, yeah, and just to be fair, in this play, it wasn't that he didn't pull up or forgot. He was impressing the coaches, going full speed. And I was watching him. It appears that's the way he plays the game throughout practice. And Ebner was impressing the coaches too. And he cut behind a blocker, and Avery came clear of that blocker, and they just had an all-out collision. It was shoulder to shoulder. It was not anything that scared you. But three coaches came running, with their arms up and the warning on the play. But seeing that he practiced that way, I thought was really impressive, Sean.
Yeah, I would say that catch from Kevin Shaw was probably the best catch of the weekend. You don't want to overanalyze these. It's a real small sample size, and like we've been saying, they're out there in shorts. It's not fall camp yet, but that was a really impressive play. Demario McCall from Ohio State had an interception that first day without having the replay. It's hard to say if that was on the quarterback or if that was a good play. I can't exactly remember. But that would have been a pick six for what it's worth. I was watching the offensive line too, just to see where some of these guys are playing. They had Braxton Jones at that left tackle spot. Interestingly, they had Zach Thomas at that right guard spot, and maybe that's a position where he could, potentially, battle for a spot, or at least give somebody a run for their money on that first line. And it'll be fun to watch how that plays out, because, you got the 4 draft picks you're throwing in there, and then there's a couple undrafted guys who could be in the mix too. And that's certainly, as Ryan Poles has said over this entire spring, they're going to pick the best 5 guys. All those spots are up for grabs. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Kyle, not that it's even close yet, but I guess it's worth noting that was my big, bold prediction coming out of draft weekend, is that I thought there was a good chance Zach Thomas could be the opening day starting right guard, because of all the offensive linemen they brought in. At this point, the idea that Lucas Patrick is even an upgrade over Sam Mustipher, let alone a significant upgrade over Sam Mustipher. He's bigger and stronger, and he has a little different attitude. But you look at the tape at Green Bay, and look at how he played there. He hasn't necessarily played better than Sam Mustipher. And so, we can hope he will, because obviously he's been given the position. You look at Dakota Dozier. I got corrected on our last podcast, and I actually was not incorrect when I said he's never really been a starter. He's played 7 years in the league. 2 years ago, COVID year, he did start 16 games for the Vikings and was so impressive that the following year he was only active for 6 games with the Vikings. So the point is, they don't have a true starter there. And when you look at, those two, Dozier, and then the kid, I think the kid they wanted to start there was Bates, who they put the offer on and didn't get. But with Dozier and Mustipher swapping first team reps there and knowing that neither one of them is really a starting NFL guard, and no other veterans brought in, I think of the rookies, that's the position most likely to get filled by one. Now, it could very well be Larry Borom. We don't know. Tevin Jenkins can play guard, but he clearly is built to play right tackle, and that's where they've got him right now. Borom surprised everybody with his athleticism and the way he remade his body and became a prospect at left tackle. And I think is interesting, but his best position coming out of Missouri, most felt, was guard and right guard. So if Borom doesn't end up getting kicked inside at right guard, to me, Thomas is the most natural of the guys they have so far. And so, to Sean's point, Kyle, I did think it was interesting that that's where they had him lined up right away. Obviously, they're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, I mean the interior of the offensive line is really in flux. All three of those positions. Lucas Patrick, I guess, is the most solid of the three. But as Hub pointed out, I mean, he's probably an upgrade in terms of overall potential over Sam Mustipher. But I don't think you should be completely sold that Lucas Patrick is going to be an answer in the interior.
He's a little bit bigger and stronger than Sam Mustipher. But beyond that, Mustipher is a real technician. He's really smart. He's great with the line calls. They said that Patrick was too. I think the fact that Patrick worked with Aaron Rodgers and that Mustipher was working with Justin Fields certainly makes a difference in how they perform. So we'll see. Because the flip side of it is that Patrick played more guard than center until last year. They may end up with 5 best. It may be that Mustipher keeps his starting center job and Patrick is your right guard, your starting right guard. I'd feel a lot better with that than what I'm seeing right now. But guys, that assumes that Jenkins and Borom can hold on to those starting tackle spots.
And overall, I mean, I've lost track with the flurry of moves that the Bears made over the weekend when they finally made the free or the undrafted free agents official. And I know they've released a couple of people, I want to say. So I'm not quite sure what the number is right now, but they're well away from the 90 guys that they're going to bring to camp. There's a lot of, like, they could go the free agent route still. There's guys that are going to get cut that I assume we're going to probably see some veterans come in added to this. There's going to be other guys they give tryouts to. It's a long way from figuring out what this roster is going to look like.
I will tell you, though, Kyle, they're not as far from 90 as you think they are. I thought that, too. I was doing some work on one of the pieces I wrote last week, and according to overthecap.com, which is a pretty trusted source, they had 72 players under contract, and that did not include the 16 undrafted rookie free agents. It did include the rookies. So that would get them to 88, and you're only going – now, those numbers tend to be fluid. I'm not sure they're at 88. I have no doubt there's going to be some veteran street guys still brought in because, there's plenty of guys at the bottom of that 88, the undrafted rookie free agents who are here for a cup of coffee. But I went into last week expecting the maximum 5 veteran tryouts allowed and was surprised when I only saw 2. And it was even a little, not a little, but a number of few, whatever I'm trying to say it, if I could speak English, there were fewer undrafted rookie free agent tryouts. There's 2 categories of those kids at these camps. There's the undrafted rookie free agents they've signed, and then there's another, oh gosh, Sean, there had to be 15 or so that were on tryouts. Yeah.
I got it in front of me here. It looks like, upwards past 20, 25. I don't even know.
Yeah. Sorting out all those numbers can be tricky. To your point, Kyle, you're correct. They're going to be adding some more street vets, but they don't have as many open spaces as I thought they did. And it just is another confirmation that this is a complete rebuild with young people, and they're for every 5 or 6 or 7 of these tryout kids, they're hoping to find one that can make a roster spot, even if it's 49 or 53. And for every 15 or 20 of them, they're hoping to find a kid that's going to play in the league, and that's the way everybody does it.
Going back to defensive back, Robert Phillips, who saw in the chat, is actually joining us from the UK, which is awesome, and we very much appreciate taking advantage of a Monday afternoon over there in the UK and joining us. He asked Elijah Hicks, second highest PFF rating in college football last year for his position. What are your views, hopes on him? Believe a 7th round rookie, right, out of Cal. If I'm
Yep.
Yeah, Cal.
Well,
Well,
Robert,
almost said UCLA. Cal.
Yeah, no, that is correct. He's the young man you probably saw on Twitter, so stoked up that he's been a Bear and he's gonna stay a Bear and doing Marian push-ups on the deck and everything else. He's an impressive kid. He was actually a corner until last year and then switched to safety, and it's one of the reasons he was a little lesser known. And he's an interesting prospect. Let me caution you as strongly as I can about PFF grades. Okay, I mean they PFF, I subscribe. I pay for it. It's worth it. Believe me. I'm not trying to be critical of them or suggest that it's not interesting. It's not NFL level scouting or grading. And so when we talk about the grades that they put on, the guys who are doing this are not professional NFL scouts. And a lot of it is done by location and grid work and how much they're around the football as opposed to actually making football plays. So whether they're grading NFL players or college kids, be very careful using the PFF grades as a scouting tool because I know that teams don't. Teams do look at it because they want to gather as much information as they can and they want to see where it might agree with their scouting report or disagree and then go back and back check themselves. But PFF is a fascinating product of actually, the media is more to blame than fans because guys looking for stats to back up stories and wanting to say good things about players will quote a lot of that stuff, but it's not necessarily always something you want to take to the bank, Sean.
Yeah, but to get to Hicks, I mean, the good thing about him is that he has that versatility. He's played cornerback, he's played safety. He's a guy you don't necessarily expect a 7th round pick to come in and contribute right away, but he's a guy who you can use almost anywhere on the field. And we didn't get to see a lot of him this weekend. He's still dealing with an injury from last season. He might have done a little bit at the beginning of practice, but then sat out most of the 7-on-7 and stuff like that. But he's certainly a guy to keep your eye on, as we're talking about this defensive backfield and how badly you need to have depth in those positions. He's certainly someone to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and Robert, please don't. I'm not trying to criticize anybody. I mean, the kid is impressive. I don't think he had a helmet at all, Sean. I think that they're really waiting with him to make sure that he's 100% from that injury. He may turn out to be a great player. It happens all the time. Doug Plank had a defense named after him, and as I recall, I don't think Doug might have been a 12th round draft choice. I know Fensick was an undrafted rookie free agent. Jay Hilgenberg was an undrafted rookie free agent. This kid's a 7th round pick. But the flip side, Kyle, is that there's a reason he was a 7th round pick.
Yeah.
31 teams passed him 240 times or something like that. So interesting athlete, productive last year, no question about that. Attitude is outstanding. And now we got to wait and see when he gets in with the veterans and see how he fits because seeing him kind of cheering on his fellow rookies didn't tell us a lot this week.
All right. Before I get to Tom John's question, I saw several people ask earlier about the Lenny photo behind me. Quickly, people have asked about that in the past, and I don't usually get a chance to jump in. That is actually a photo I got in the mail from one of my good friends for my birthday a few years ago. It sat on my desk at the office, and then I think the day I left, got sent home from the pandemic, I figured there was going to be a while before I came back. I grabbed that thing. And really, it's there's no reason for it to be there other than the fact that I just don't want it to be completely white behind me. And then the championship belt is actually from our Friday Night Drive brand that covers high school football across Northern Illinois. A wonderful law firm out of LaSalle, Peru, SKGR. Yeah, no, SGKR. Make sure I don't screw up their donated those, or they come on as a sponsor. We hand those out throughout the football season to the top player of the week across Northern Illinois. So those are why those two things are behind us there.
And the kids love getting that belt. That's so cool for them.
Yeah, they do. It's a big thing.
And Kyle, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'll be the old. There's no clue what's going on. Who's Lenny?
Lenny is a character from The Simpsons. So
I just want to. I'm probably the only one who doesn't know, but for the benefit of our listeners or viewers, I wanted to make sure everybody knew.
Homer has this framed photo of Lenny in the show, or is given this framed photo. So My friend did that for me as well. But so Tom Johns had asked, the Bears could have easily won Pittsburgh and Baltimore games and been in playoff contention. They entered free agency with $6 million in cap money. Was Poles justified in tear down instead of retool? We could have this debate for a long time.
Well, the answer, yes, he's completely justified. They're a team that appeared to be going in the wrong direction, even though you're right. They weren't that far off. 2 playoff trips their first 3 years, winning record, never had a losing season. You have the one off year, and you say, well, okay. So the answer to your question is, yeah, they could have reloaded and tried to compete for a playoff spot this year, but were they close enough to a reload that would make them a Super Bowl contender? And the answer is not. No, I should say. And by making them a year older, they would have been that further away next year. So the question is, what is the pressure to win right now? Obviously, George McCaskey has, let Ryan Poles know that he's more interested in the bigger picture, which is regularly contending for Super Bowls than winning right now. And they were middle-aged to old, one of the older rosters in the NFL, or at least aging. When you talk about the what'd you say, the 6th most cap money, that was after the decision, not to reload. I mean, that was once they'd unloaded, Khalil Mack and some other things. They didn't have a ton of cap money, so it was a coin toss as to what Poles and Flus thought was best for theirs and the organization's future, Sean, and I think it was probably 50-50, and so it was completely justified. And if you get it right, it will prove to have been the good idea. If you get it wrong, and you wander in the wasteland for 3 or 4 years, then obviously it was a mistake.
Yeah, it's justified, and really what it comes down to is it's justified if that's what George McCaskey is cool with doing, because you can be certain that Ryan Poles laid this plan out for him when they were going through that interview process. This is not a surprise to George, I'm sure. The way that he's approaching this offseason and this whole plan. And once you decide you're going to do that, I think you got to get rid of the Mac contract. I mean, that gives you so much more flexibility in the future. And it sucks for the present. Sure. He would have made this team a lot better next season. But if you're going to rebuild, just go the whole way. You can't do a partial rebuild and hope, and expect that that's going to turn out the results you want. He's approaching this from the very bottom, and rebuilding it the way he wants to do it. And I think if George McCaskey's cool with that, then I see no reason why it should be, let me rephrase that. It's justified if that's the way they want to go about approaching it.
Kyle, one other quick point as to why it was probably the right move, even beyond being justified, is their 3 best players on defense. Khalil Mack was injured for the first time in his career, missed 10 of 7 games and played hurt twice. And so it does appear to have been a Liz Frank, which is tricky. They've never confirmed that, but the way they described the foot injury, and you don't know exactly how those are going to, heal. But he is also 31 years old. Now, I think Khalil Mack is probably going to have the best season of his career this year with the Chargers, because that's how much I think of Khalil Mack. But how much more often he could do that and whether he would was uncertainty for the new guys in town in Poles and Eberflus. I don't imagine they think that Robert Quinn's going to have 18 and a half sacks again this year, because I don't know that anybody in the league thinks he's going to have 18 and a half sacks again this year. And as much as people do not want to hear this, the simple reality is that Roquan Smith is now going into the 5th year of his rookie deal, that option year that they picked up. And while I love the kid, and he seems like a great guy, and he says he wants to be here, he's his own agent. He won't hire an agent. He's made no real attempts to do an extension. So there's a real possibility that after this year, you'd have been without all 3 of them anyway. And now your defense is, what do you got to hang your hat on? You turn it around on offense. That was already a complete rebuild, other than they hope at quarterback. You're good at running back, but running backs aren't that hard to find in today's NFL. No offense, David Montgomery, who I think is special. I think once they dug into it, it probably, all along, I just wanted the answer to the question. So we knew what to expect and how to cover them. But I'd say if I had to lean, I'd probably be 52% rebuild, 48% reload, and the odds would be better for me on rebuild if I didn't know how unhappy the fans are going to be by week 6, week 7, week 8, because they're kidding themselves into thinking this doesn't mean a 3 or 4 win season. That's probably what it does mean. But if you take it, for what it is, then it probably was the right decision.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how fans react once we get into the season, particularly if Justin Fields is taking a bit of a beating, or if he's not progressing the way that we're all expecting or hoping. And Tom Johns he asked that original question about rebuild or reload, what was the right decision, and he had a follow-up question I'll throw up there because it kind of ties into this. Despite what Poll says about Fields, do you trade your best player, referring to Khalil Mack, and spend the least in NFL if you really believe in a QB on the second year of his rookie deal? Waste a precious year of control, waste a controllable year, essentially is what he's saying there. And I'm having trouble, I guess. We want to put Justin Fields' development and a rebuild together and tie them together, but if you're undergoing this rebuild after already drafting the QB, right? The previous regime, and you come in and you decide you want to start this rebuild, I don't necessarily know if that means that you don't believe in Justin Fields. I think maybe we're inferring something by them undergoing this rebuild. But I mean, they could be related. That's what it's hard to get into Ryan Poles' head to understand, like, how he actually feels about Justin Fields and Justin Fields. I think I said Justin Fields there. Uh, how much he ties a rebuild to his quarterback.
Well, Tom, I think the key phrase you said in there is waste a controllable year, and I don't think that's what they're doing at all. I was listening to Peyton Manning recently explaining why he didn't think he'd become a complete NFL quarterback until the end of his 3rd season, beginning of his 4th season. Troy Aikman has talked about it repeatedly after going 1-15 as a rookie. It takes at least 2 or 3 years. I mean, it was interesting talking to Ryan Poles at the owners' meetings. We went off the record a little bit. And so it's got to stay off the record. But one of the things that came up was somebody asking him about Patrick Mahomes, who obviously he helped draft and develop, and he pointed out a few of the things that Mahomes still needs to learn, which I think were obvious this year as the Chiefs hit that slump and struggled. Remember, people forget the Chiefs were 2-4 at one point last year, and so the point is, I don't care if you're, Mac Jones going to the playoffs your first year, or Ben Roethlisberger or Russell Wilson, who led legitimate contenders as rookies. It almost never happens. And so, with Justin Fields, it's the 5-year process, and you're not wasting this year, especially with the focus you've put around the running game, and trying to take some of the pressure off him. So, would it have been nice to try and keep the defense a top 10 unit, because a good defense is a rookie's best friend, keeping the pressure off him to score points? Sure, but you're not wasting this year. There's a ton of work to do with Justin Fields. He's going to get his 3rd new system in 3 years if he go Ohio State, Nagy Laser, and now Getsy Janoko, or whatever it's going to be. So I don't think they see it that way. Now, if the kid, and the flip side of it is, if he does not take a big step forward this year, then you're probably sitting on a top 5 pick next year, when you're going to have another top quarterback class. And the first 2 picks are going to be quarterbacks. I mean, I know it's way in advance, but if CJ Stroud and Bryce Young don't go 1-2 or 2-1, everybody's going to be shocked, unless one of them gets hurt or really, makes a mess of this coming season. And then, you got Jerkovic, I think is his name, from Boston College. There's about 5 or 6 quarterbacks that are going to be first rounders next year, some of them later in the first round, as opposed to none of whom should have been this year. And if you're sitting there with the top 5 pick, that's part of why you rebuild, because you don't have to pay extra draft choices like they did for Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields. So it's not what they're hoping for, but it was another, piece of the puzzle that had this make sense.
Yeah, and it depends, what your definition of being sold on Justin Fields is, because you talk about these controllable years or these cheap years on the rookie contract, and when you go about it from that lens of saying, okay, we have these 4, or if they pick up that 5th-year option, we have these 5 years where he is on a manageable salary and you can build around him. That's also kind of assuming that he won't be, that you're going to give him that extension that's worth $30 million a year in the future. And that's, at this point, it's far too early to say if that's the case. You can't really act as if you only have these 4 years when you just don't know what's going to happen with Justin in the future. You hope that he's that quarterback that you give a long-term deal and you extend and he becomes your guy, and at that point you figure out how to build around that big salary. But you just can't really worry about that, and at least not at this stage. And I think that's what's a little bit unusual about this rebuild, if you want to call it that, is most of the time, these teams in this situation are trying to find that quarterback. And it's almost a luxury for the Bears that they don't have to worry about that this year. They don't have to worry about that next year. They can give Justin a little bit of time to see if he's going to, take that next step in his professional career.
I'm going to throw this out there. I'm genuinely interested. I wish there was a function to do a poll for like people in the chat. Because I want to throw this idea out here and respond in the chat. If Justin Fields came out and had a bad year, he did not show the progression that you personally are hoping for, right? And the Bears end up picking top 2, top 3, and one of those QBs are there. Would you be okay with Ryan Poles investing in another quarterback this early? It's or do you think that Justin Fields deserves at least 2 years under Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus? I'm interested to find out what Bears fans think. And overall, you looked at what happened in Arizona when Josh Rosen had come in. You got 1 year shipped off to Miami because they knew they had a guy in Kyler Murray that they really liked. You wonder if Ryan Poles gets out. They go 2-15 or picking second overall, and he really likes Bryce Young sitting there. Does he pull that trigger? And I don't know how Bears fans would react to that. I don't know how I would react to that. I mean, it's when you invest what you did in Justin Fields, not only top 12 pick, was it number 11? I can't remember off the top of my head, but you traded assets. You traded your first round pick this year to do it. But it's a different regime, and the NFL is getting a little bit trigger happy isn't the right word, but they are willing to move on quicker than they were in the past. A lot of franchises.
Well, Kyle, I think a lot of your reaction at the end of Justin Fields' second year is going to be colored by what you see on the field during his second year. So to say, well, gosh, what if Poles comes in and drafts another quarterback in the first round? He may have to. We don't know. I think the problem with the initial question, again, that phrase, wasting a controllable year, Justin Fields has yet to prove that he's capable of giving you an NFL year that would be considered wasted. That's where he's at in his development, and they have to find out. I don't expect them to be drafting a quarterback. First of all, I love Justin Fields. I think the kid does have it. I think he's got the traits. I think he can be a franchise quarterback. He has shown nothing mentally or personality-wise to suggest that he can't. And so I think we have to stop kind of taking the negative approach to it. He is still to me the second most exciting prospect to come out of last year's draft. You can't throw away what he and Trevor Lawrence did with everything leading up to it, and why Zach Wilson went ahead of him is a mystery I will never understand. It didn't make any sense. And why Trey Lance went ahead of him, I understand a little better because of the athletic ability, but to me, again, Fields was the better prospect. That is all still true. None of that has changed. Mac Jones is the only one who's come well up in people's eyes. And even with him, is he going to improve up what you saw this year? That was the concern. The Josh Rosen analogy, I don't buy that because, Josh Rosen's problems were in his head and in the locker room more than on the field. We never found out what he could do on the field. He had the rep come out of school as be careful with this guy, least popular guy on his college team. That's why I was floored when the Bears used the 12th pick on Cade McNown 23 years ago, because everybody knew he was going to be trouble. And so that was unusual. I think the more interesting one is how quickly the Eagles pulled the trigger on a second-round pick on Jalen Hurts when everybody thought Carson Wentz might still be an MVP candidate, but you can never have enough talent at that position. And if Justin Fields by the second half of this season isn't looking like a guy who can lead an explosive NFL offense, you owe it to yourself to look at those quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think it would have to get really bad for them to just move on from him that quickly. I mean, it's certainly possible, but I don't think it's, I think if he has a mediocre season where you can still see some of that potential, they may give him one more year to figure this out.
So, Kyle, here's the interesting question, though, because this is where we get into the personalities of all these guys. And I'm talking about the leaders, is we all feel at this point, I think it's maybe the only unanimous statement I can make without polling everybody in the world, that they have not done enough to help him at wide receiver and offensive line. I asked Luke Getsy, how he felt about it specifically Sunday, and he said that he thinks that it's a little overrated. He thinks it's more about chemistry and that they've got enough wide receivers who played enough ball, as he put it, and it's them about learning fields and getting the body language and the signals down. I don't personally buy that at all. I think that's wishful thinking. I hope that Luke is right. But if we get into the middle of the season, start to go towards the second half of the season, and Fields does not appear to be progressing, there is going to be a great debate over whether it's because Fields isn't good enough or can't, or because the new GM didn't get him enough help. And so if that's the pressure the new GM is feeling, he's obviously going to want to, lay at least some of that responsibility on the player. And so I think it's going to make it more likely that they do seriously consider other options. But this is all premature, because I personally think that Fields has the traits to be a franchise quarterback. So let's let him go. Let's see what they do. I refuse to believe there's not going to be at least one more veteran receiver brought in here. If nothing else, at least one more. So, let's see what the depth chart looks like on opening day, and let's see how Fields responds the first half of the season before we can really have, valid opinions on what we're talking about.
And if chemistry really matters that much, if that's so important, we do have to remember that, he's got his Darnell Mooney was his top receiver last year, and Cole Kmet was his top tight end. That's not nothing.
I just want to say I asked that question earlier, but I want to make it clear. I still believe that there's a much greater chance that Justin Fields is a quality starting QB that the Bears are happy with than him falling flat on his face this year. But Hub, you brought up the point about the talent around him. I am already dreading the debate. If Justin Fields does come out in September and October and struggles, you're going to hear it from it's going to be either Justin Fields sucks from some people, or it's going to be, well, of course he sucks because they gave him no talent. Not even Peyton Manning could work with these wide receivers or this offensive line. And you wish that there had been a bit more talent, or at least I wish that they had installed a bit more talent or proven talent around Justin Fields, so you had a better idea of where he was at, and hopefully he's just good enough to overcome the deficiencies around him.
Well, listen, guys, here's what we do know. I mean, the offensive line could go a lot of different ways. They've got big enough bodies that they're strong enough, they're powerful enough, a couple of them are nasty enough. I'm not writing off this offensive line. You just wish there was more top-end talent. They have done a lot, in my opinion, to establish that they're going to be a run-first football team, and they do have some valuable assets there. I mean, I liked picking up Darrington Evans, on waivers off of Tennessee. Then you plug in this Tristan Ebner kid, and I don't really expect them to take a lot of carries away from David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. And then, you look at Velus Jones. I mean, he is a unique weapon. He's going to be the Swiss Army knife, and so that's going to help things. This kid, Chase Allen, he's an undrafted rookie free agent. I don't even know if he makes the team, but according to several, scouts I talked to, may have been the best inline blocking tight end in this draft, and so now you go two tights with Cole Kmet and Chase Allen. I think that's your landscaper, but I don't know.
Not mine. I think it's Sean's now.
Could be.
You guys hear that in the background? I'm going to mute for a bit.
Yeah.
No, that's it wasn't terrible. Don't worry about it. I just was wondering if they had a power fertilizer. I've never heard of one of those before. So, at any rate, guys, I do think that the running game will be upgraded, and that will help. It will be interesting to see what Velus Jones can do. Darnell Mooney is a very good number 2 wide receiver. So, I think that they're working a little bit with handcuffs, but at the same time, if Fields does progress, you're going to see some improvement, and then it'll be up to smart people to try and form an opinion. How much of this is because he's not progressing enough or isn't going to get there, and how much of it is because he just needs more help.
And I'm going to throw this up from Homer Cuts. Just a glass half full, boys, with the coaching staff, and I think it's and GM. They're going to actually get these boys playing. That's another debate. All this kind of goes back in when you're talking Justin Fields is we still don't know. And Hub, I know you hate this kind of, I shouldn't say hate this debate, but Justin Fields had struggles himself that were his fault on the football field last year. But, to I guess what Homer's trying to say there, are Homer Cuts. We don't know how much of an effect Matt Nagy and the dysfunction in the coaching staff, or at least the play calling and all that went into that offense, did hamper Justin Fields this year. And that's just another layer of us trying to figure out where he is and how much he can progress in year number 2, right?
Well, listen, guys, at the end of the day, there's no question that it was time for a change. There's no question that Matt Nagy, our last Matt, did not have full control of his offense, and things were going in the wrong direction. Momentum is a big thing for everybody. And his first 3 years, or at least his second and third year, he found good ways to break the fall, if you will, and end the losing streaks. But in year 4, even once they stopped losing and won a game, then they started losing again. It wasn't pretty. Okay. That said, Justin Fields did not succeed at whatever it was he was being asked to do. Okay. I mean, it's not like the plays he was given were impossible to run. It's not like scheme he was given was impossible to run. He didn't do a good job with it. And the main reason he didn't do a good job with it is because he was not properly prepared, not with poor coaching. John DeFilippo is a highly respected quarterback coach. I mean, say what you want about Flip as an offensive coordinator, or probably no longer head coaching candidate, but he's very respected as a quarterback coach. And so, at least half, if not more, of Justin Fields' failures last year were Justin Fields' fault. Not the coaching staff. I get so sick of hearing, "Oh, well, Nagy killed him and Nagy dragged him down and everything else." That's just not real. But if you're going to play a rookie quarterback, you want him in a position to succeed, and more because of the lack of talent around him on the offensive line and the fact that they decided to bury Allen Robinson early in the season, which never made any sense. He didn't have the weapons. So I just think that we don't know about Justin Fields. Sean, I don't know what else to say. We know what we think he can be. I know what I think he's going to be, but he hasn't done anything on an NFL field yet to prove to us that he can.
Yeah, sorry guys. The lawn people were here outside my building. I don't know. Hopefully you can't hear that anymore.
I think we're okay.
Okay. Well, actually, not to take it in another direction, but we did just get a release from the Bears about 10 minutes ago with an update here on some guys they signed from this weekend. Christian Albright, John Alexander, long snapper Antonio Ortiz, defensive end Carson Taylor, DB AJ Thomas, running back Demontre Tuggle have all been signed. They also waived a handful of players, which includes Ladarius Mack, and then a couple of the undrafted guys, Jalen Alexander, Amari Carter, Landon Lenore, the guy from Slippery Rock, Savon Scarver, and Master Teague were all waived.
I'm sad. I just got to find out about Slippery Rock last week on the podcast here, and he's already gone. Damn it. Sorry. Jalen Alexander, just quickly there, a linebacker out of Purdue, is actually a Hoffman Estates kid. I found to be kind of an
you and I
intriguing
saw
player.
him play in high school.
I saw him play against Prairie Ridge out of Crystal Lake in I want to say state semifinal or quarterfinal game, and Hoffman Estates lost that game, but it wasn't because Jalen Alexander. I believe he had 3 touchdowns in the game, probably had about 300 total yards. Yeah, so really talented kid. I hope he catches on somewhere.
Well, yeah, and I suspect, guys, that Jalen Alexander's problem is just the competition, because you've got Caleb Johnson back from last year, who I think a lot of people like beyond Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. And then I mentioned my 2 favorites, Jack Sanborn and C.J. Avery, all play the same position as Alexander. So I think that was, in terms of young prospects, that was a numbers game, and I certainly wouldn't rule out the possibility that he is even back here or hooks on with another team.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Oh, I was just going to add to it. And Master Teague is that running back out of Ohio State. The thing that struck me on Saturday, Hub, they were warming up right in front of us, and we had those running backs right in front of us. And man, that dude is huge. He is so much bigger than some of those other running backs.
That is so funny that you say that because yesterday, Sunday, he kind of ran over. Actually, you're right. I noticed it on Friday, but then again yesterday, I forget the circumstances. They were what drill they were doing, but he ended up running pretty much right up to me to get a ball that had gotten loose, and I thought I was looking at a tight end. I mean, that's a big young man. And so, this is a case where you bring in a guy like that on a tryout. He was on a rookie tryout. He did not get a UDRFA contract. I think they wanted to see if that size matched up with speed and athletic ability, and apparently they decided it didn't. Again, guys, we wish all these kids well. We knew that of the 50 plus players at the rookie mini camp, only 27 of them came in with contracts, and even a couple of them are gone. And that's part of the process, whether you're rebuilding or whether you're a defending Super Bowl team.
Sorry, I got distracted here looking through some of the comments. I'm derailing us. I had thoughts going through my head because people are responding about Matt Nagy now still. I guess I want to circle back to it because now we're talking about play calling and how that affected Justin Fields, and I want to see if you guys agree with me. I never had the sense, and this is going to sound dumb because there was many times throughout the years where we looked at like a 3rd and 1 or 4th and 2. Most of the time, I didn't have a huge issue with individual play calls from Matt Nagy. I thought the biggest issue Matt Nagy had with his offense is play calls never seemed to build on the previous play. Like there was never any rhythm with that offense. You know what I'm saying? Anyone?
Well, yeah. I mean, Kyle, you're right, but we know that there was at least a 6 or 7 game stretch where Bill Lazor was calling all the plays, and then there were other times when we didn't know which one was calling plays, and they tried to make a mystery out of it. Now that's Matt's fault as the head coach, but guys, I don't understand why isn't good enough for people that Matt Nagy got fired. I think that the consensus is that he deserved it after 4 years, which is unusual for a coach with a winning record and 2 playoff trips and a Coach of the Year award in 4 years as a first-time head coach. But it was going the wrong way. He got fired. If you want to color everything that happened under him and say that some guys are good players because Nagy kept putting him in a position to succeed, and other guys failed because of Nagy, it's just not objective analysis. I don't understand. The Allen Robinson thing is a mystery that every once in a while something happens that 4 or 5 seasons later I'm still trying to figure it out, and I understand all the contract crap that went on. But Sean, they clearly decided the first day of training camp that Darnell Mooney was going to get more attention in that passing game than Allen Robinson, and it just never made sense to me. And so there were some coaching things that I think were pretty awful. But what happens is you get fired. He did. So let's focus on what Flus and Getsy are going to do and go forward, because the players that are still here are because they believe they can be good, and so let's see if they can make them good.
And I think you can be optimistic about Luke Getsy and his offense based on where he's coming from, and you see him coming from that Packers offense that sort of brought Aaron Rodgers back to that MVP level the past couple of years, and the way that they were doing that with some different looks and rolling him out a bit more, and certainly there's things to like about that, and we haven't seen him do play call for a game, but I think there's reason to be optimistic that this is going to be a lot better than it was under Nagy.
Yeah, Kyle, one point I do want to sneak in here is, Luke is, he's not young by NFL standards anymore. These guys in their mid-30s, moving to the second half of their 30s are getting head coaching jobs already. But he is young, NFL historically as a coach. He's only got 8 years experience in the NFL, only 5 as a position coach. And I think we sensed that the first time we met him. I think he was adjusting to the spotlight and the microphone and the fact that as the coordinator, he's going to be on stage every week. He, to me, guys, yesterday, Sunday, was just so much more relaxed and comfortable in his own skin. And I thought really impressive in the way that he handled the press conference. So he looks to be a quick study. And this is all new to him, and he is going to make mistakes. There's no question about that. He's got to get a feel. he talked yesterday, Monday, about the importance of the relationship between quarterback and offensive coordinator. And he said the best part about his first 3-4 months on the job is the chemistry that he feels that he and Justin are starting to develop. And this is a guy who was Aaron Rodgers' personal coach the last 3 years and the passing game coordinator there. So, these are all the things that are developing, and they're going to be developing well into the middle of the season. But these are the kind of the traits and things we should be looking for. And again, guys, I mean, we can talk about Matt Nagy all you want. I'll just tell you, he's a nice man who had some success and a few more failures and got fired. And in his late 30s, he's back with his old team, and we'll see what happens with him next. I got into a debate with Potsy. It wasn't a debate, it was a fun conversation. I know Mark Potash sometimes joins us sometimes on this cast. We were talking about on the sidelines yesterday. He said, "What do you think the odds are that he gets another shot?" Nagy. And I was like, whoa. He might, again, guy's got a Coach of the Year award. The guy had a winning record as a head coach. I mean, but the first thing, and it's not as the Nagy negativity is nowhere near as great outside of the Chicago market around the NFL as it is here. So we'll see. I don't think it's happening soon because, everybody saw some of the mistakes he made in terms of his evolution as a head coach. But I think Bears fans just need to put Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace in the past, and let's focus on this rebuild.
Yeah, quickly, I was asked that question by a friend over the weekend too, about how quickly Matt Nagy, or if Matt Nagy's probably going to be a head coach in the NFL again at some point, whether you believe that's reasonable or not. Just kind of the way the process works. I mean, guys get their first job. Some of them succeed, most of them fail. A lot of them end up with their former bosses, and it kind of, they kind of, air out the dirty laundry while they're there and get the stink off them. And then 4 or 5 years down the road, those interviews start cropping up. I mean, listen, if Josh McDaniels can fail in Denver, then take the job in Indy, pull out of the job, and then still 3 years later, 4 years later, get another job as an NFL head coach. To me, that means pretty much anyone can find themselves back in the discussion. Matt Nagy's going to have another chance at some point. But going back to Luke Getsy, that's really you wrote your column about it, Hub. The Getsy thing is one of the most intriguing things to me because I look at Green Bay over the last few years, and here's a guy that was not he was not the offensive coordinator. He had a big hand in that offense, though. And you kind of break it down. I mean, Aaron Rodgers still a good quarterback, but a declining quarterback at his age. You can see the cracks at least, right? There are times you look at him, you go, that's not the same guy that he was 3 or 4 years ago. You add in the fact that the wide receiver room outside of Devontae Adams has not been very good in Green Bay over the last 4 or 5 years. The offensive line has been in flux. They've had a lot of turnover there, partially because of age and injuries, because of their salary cap situation, tight end. But you look at it, and their offense has been really efficient. They've been able to use a power run game with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, and before that with Jamal Williams, and really find a way to cater that offense around the personnel have. So that's the upside to me. Getsy was in that and saw, okay, this is what I have to work with. It might not be perfect, but we're going to fashion this offense to get the most out of it as we can.
Yeah, Sean, I think that Kyle may be engaged in a little bit of wishful thinking there. Most of what he said I'll buy, but Aaron Rodgers obviously has some cracks in his head, but I'm not seeing any cracks in the quarterback yet. So, we'll see how. But I get your point, and you're right. I'm not trying to, debate that. No, I agree with everything that you just said, Kyle. Hey, you remember during the hiring process, they had gone through the interviews. It looked like they had gotten to their final 3 of Matt Eberflus and Dan Quinn and Jim Caldwell. They came back for second interviews, and I wrote the column. There's other guys out there I'd like to see interviewed for head coach, and one of them was Luke Getsy. So I was not at all disappointed, Sean, when he was hired as the offensive coordinator. I think it's a really interesting hire, and you may have the next big thing on offense, but now we got to give him a chance to perform.
Yeah, and he did interview for the Broncos job, I believe, and that's that one thing that he doesn't have on that resume is calling plays, and you're not going to be able to do that in Green Bay where you got Matt LaFleur, and so this is a good opportunity for him, and hopefully he shines in this role, and the Bears have one of those next up and coming offensive coordinators here.
Yeah, and just so everybody's clear, and you guys are absolutely right, he's never called plays in the NFL.
Yeah.
But after 3 years as the receivers coach in Green Bay under Mike McCarthy, he left to go to Mississippi State to be the OC so he could call plays. So he did have a year calling plays in the SEC and then was brought back when Matt LaFleur got hired. But no, he's never done it in the NFL, and it is a real concern. Guys, you've heard me preach about this before. I think play calling is so overrated sometimes. I mean, some guys are obviously really good at it as head coaches, but whenever offenses struggle, the first thing fans want to do is go after the play calling. When the reality is, the only people who even know what the play called was the guys in the huddle and the coach, and they see it when they're grading film. Because some of it is options with RPOs these days. A lot of it is check with me's at the line of scrimmage. Fans and media judging play calling is really not an accurate science. Let's just leave it at that.
Not inaccurate. That's a fair way to put it. Yes. Yeah. It's really hard to understand, even for people that cover the team, exactly what's going on. The NFL is so cloak and dagger, and everyone's, they want to give you information without actually ever giving you any inside information, if you know what I mean. Like, coaches are so good at it nowadays about disguising what they actually were trying to do, that it can be difficult.
Especially when you're asking those guys in the secondary, whose fault was that breakdown? They're never going to tell you.
Yeah.
This is not a criticism, guys. I mean, it's a reality. But I'm going to venture the guess that at least, more than half the fans out there, and quite frankly, a lot of people in the media, look at a play, go back and watch it on tape, and they're still not sure if it was a called run or a pass because it was an RPO. And so it's really hard for anybody but GMs and coaches to judge play calling because they're the only ones who know what's really being called.
All right, let's go ahead and wrap this up, guys. We're over an hour here. We'll be back. Well, I'll let you handle the getting out of here, Hub.
I'll take care of all the menu items, the logistics. Yeah, guys, we really, it's an interesting part of the season now because on one hand, it's not the dog days, it's the developmental stage. We are going to get to see the team each of the next 3 weeks beginning next week, a week from Tuesday, which I believe is May 17th, I think, is our first day out there on the field at OTAs. So we are going to take the rest of this week off from our podcast. We're going to get back on our regular schedule, we hope, beginning a week from Friday. And to try and plug in a date, I believe that's going to be May 20th at 9:30 Chicago time. If you want to join us live, we hope you will, because we love getting your questions and your opinions and trying to respond to them. If not, make sure you go to the App Store on your phone or iTunes or shawlocal.com and download your subscription to our podcast so that you make sure you get it every week. And in the meantime, we thank everybody who joined us this morning. We hope that we answered some of your questions. And next phase for the Bears, guys. One other thing I'll add here, Kyle, maybe let each of you guys make a closing comment on this, is that they've got a decision to make right now, because I still believe everybody thinks they're going to get more help at wide receiver and maybe on the offensive line. But they haven't seen the kids with the veterans yet. There's more post-June 1 cuts coming. So I'm not going to say that they're absolutely going to be adding another street vet or two in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But once you get between that second and third OTA heading into minicamp, and it's June 2nd, and there's more street vets on the field, I think, Sean, that's when Bears fans may see a few more veterans coming in.
Yeah, that's a time to watch. And Ryan Poles said, I think the question was about the offensive line, but it could really be about anything. They're not done yet. That's a key time to watch here. We might have some unexpected names out there on the free agent market.
Yeah, Kyle, the key to this rookie class is that they haven't been on the field with the vets yet. And so until you see them with NFL players, it's hard to know how much you got.
Yeah, it's going to be their first kind of look. The rookies this past weekend was kind of just get them in the building, get their nerves out of the way, let them feel comfortable. The veterans will be around more here the next few weeks, and we'll start to get an idea of where they stand and where they feel they still need to find some more depth.
All right, guys, that's it for us this week on our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. Thank you so much for being with us. Next edition will be available for you to join live or to listen to after it's recorded at 9:30 Chicago time on Friday, May 20th. In the meantime, stay with our Twitter accounts at Sean_Hammond, at Kyle Nabors, at Hub_Arkush. If there's any breaking news, any special podcast scheduled, any change in the schedule, you'll find out about it there. And until then, we look forward to talking to you again real soon.